My name is Clara Whitmore. I am 34 years old. 3 months ago, two men in military uniform knocked on my front door. I saw them through the window before I answered, and I already knew. You always know. They told me my husband Daniel had been killed during a mission overseas. They said there had been an explosion. They said no one from his team survived. I thanked them and closed the door and stood alone in my hallway for a long time without moving. For 3 months after that, I cried myself to sleep almost every night. I told myself I had accepted it. I told myself I was moving forward. But the truth is, a part of me never believed he was gone. Then one afternoon, my sister called me. Her voice was shaking, in a way I had never heard before. She said, "Clara, you need to come to my house right now." She said, "There is something you have to see with your own eyes." And when I saw what she was holding on that phone screen, my entire body went cold and still. Before I tell you what I saw, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channels, and tell me in the comments what country you are watching from. Now let me tell you everything. Daniel had been a soldier for 9 years when we lost him. Or when we thought we lost him. 9 years of deployments and phone calls from strange time zones, and that specific kind of waiting that military wives know and never fully get used to. He was disciplined and brave in the way that people who are genuinely brave are, quietly, without needing anyone to notice. But at home, he was just Daniel. The man who burned toast every single morning and never once learned from it. The man who remembered the name of every nurse and orderly in every hospital we ever visited because he believed people who were overlooked deserved to be seen. The man who used to hold my face in both hands before every deployment and say, "I will come back to you." Every single time. I will come back. He had never broken that promise. Until the morning those two officers stood on my porch. They were respectful. They used words like honor and sacrifice and service. And I heard all of them from somewhere very far away, because the only words that had actually reached me were the ones that came before all of those. He didn't survive. Everything after that was sound without meaning. After they left, I stood in the hallway, for I don't know how long. Eventually, I walked into the kitchen. His coffee mug was still on the counter. His jacket was still on the hook by the door. The house looked exactly the same as it had that morning, and the morning before that, and every morning for the 9 years we had lived in it together. But the weight of it had changed completely. Every object in every room had become a before and after. Before I knew, after I knew, the weeks that followed were the kind of weeks you survive rather than live. People came. They brought food and flowers and careful voices. They sat with me and said the right things, and I was grateful for all of it, and also completely unreachable. At night, when everyone had gone home, I would sit on the couch with my phone and go through old photographs. Sometimes I played his voicemails just to hear his voice filling the room again, just to make the silence feel less total. I told myself every morning that today I would begin moving forward, that Daniel would want that staying inside the grief was not the same as honoring him. I believed it intellectually. I could not make myself feel it. 3 months passed this way. Then on a Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting on the couch with a cup of tea that had gone cold when my phone rang. My younger sister, Lily. She was usually easy on the phone, quick to laugh, the kind of person who filled conversations without effort. But the moment I answered, I heard something different in her voice. A tightness. A held breath. "Clara," she said. "Where are you right now?" "At home," I told her. A pause. Short but heavy. "Can you come here?" she said. "Right now." Her voice dropped slightly on the last 2 words. "There is something I need to show you, and I cannot explain it on the phone. You just have to come." I asked her what was wrong. She said she couldn't tell me yet. I asked if someone was hurt. She said no. I asked her to just tell me. She said, "Clara, please just come." Her voice cracked on the please in a way that ended the conversation. The drive to her house took 15 minutes. It felt much longer. My mind ran through every possibility and found nothing that made sense. When I pulled into her driveway, she was already standing outside the front door. That alone told me something. Lily did not wait outside. She was the kind of person who called you from inside the house to tell you the door was open. Seeing her standing in the cold on the front step with her arms crossed and her face pale stopped something in my chest. She walked toward the car before I had fully stopped. "Come inside," she said. She took my arm gently and we walked into the house together. In the living room, she picked up her phone from the table. She held it for a moment, without turning the screen toward me. Like she needed one more second, then she showed me a photograph, posted 2 days earlier, on the page of a small medical clinic near the border of the region where Daniel's mission had taken place. The post described a soldier who had been found badly injured following a military operation several months prior. A local family had discovered him near the road and brought him in. The clinic had been caring for him since. The man in the photograph was sitting outside on a low wall. Mountains behind him. A quiet road. He was thinner than I remembered. His beard had grown out, and there were bandages visible near his left shoulder, but his face, his eyes, the small scar above his right eyebrow from a training accident in his 3rd year of service. It was Daniel. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. My hands had started shaking at some point, without me noticing. "That is not possible," I said. My voice came out very quiet and very far away. "I know," Lily said. "I know, but look at him, Clara. Just look." I looked. I kept looking. The more I looked, the more certain I became, and the more certain I became, the less I was able to breathe properly. If Daniel had survived the explosion. If he had been found. If he had been recovering for 3 months in a small clinic near the border, while I sat in our house, listening to his voicemails in the dark. Why hadn't he called? Why hadn't anyone contacted us? Why had the military told me he was gone? Lily had already sent a message to the clinic page. No response yet. We tried calling the number listed. It rang and rang. We sent another message, this one from me, explaining who I was, explaining what the military had told us, asking about the man in the photograph. Then we sat together on her couch and waited. The waiting was the worst kind. The kind where hope and fear are so evenly matched that you cannot settle into either one. Every few minutes one of us picked up the phone to check. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Then almost an hour later a notification appeared. Lily opened it. The message from the clinic was short and factual. Yes, the man in the photograph had been brought to them several months ago, following a military operation. He had sustained multiple gunshot wounds and severe injuries consistent with an explosion. A local family had found him near the road and carried him in. He had been unconscious for several days. He was now stable and recovering. I read the message 3 times. Each time the words landed differently. He was alive. Daniel was alive. 3 months of grief and I had been crying for a man who was sitting on a wall outside a clinic in the mountains. "I'm going," I said. Lily looked at me. "Now?" "Yes," I said. "I need to see him. With my own eyes. In person. I need to stand in front of him." She nodded once. "Then I'm coming with you," she said. And that was the end of the discussion. We booked the earliest available flight. I went home and packed a bag, and sat on the edge of the bed for a while in the quiet. The house felt different than it had that morning. Not lighter exactly, but changed. Like something had shifted in the walls. The flight was several hours. I sat by the window and did not sleep and did not eat and barely spoke. Lily sat beside me and did not push. She understood that I needed the silence to hold everything together, until I could confirm with my own hands that it was real. When we landed, we hired a car. The road to the clinic wound through mountains and the landscape was still and beautiful, in the way that remote places often are, completely indifferent to the size of what is happening inside the people passing through them. I watched it go by without really seeing it. The clinic was small and clean. A nurse met us at the entrance. When I told her who I was and why we had come, she nodded and said they had been expecting us. She pointed toward the back of the building. She said he was in the garden. I walked to the door at the back of the clinic. I put my hand on the handle and stood there for a moment. Lily touched my arm once, lightly, and said nothing. I pushed the door open. The garden was small. A few plants along a low fence. A wooden bench near the center. Afternoon light coming through the gap in the mountains on the western side. On the bench sat a man, thinner than I remembered. Scarring visible at his neck and shoulder. Beard grown out past anything he had ever worn before. But the way he sat, the particular way he held his shoulders, the shape of his hands resting in his lap, Daniel. I said his name. Just his name. Barely above a whisper, he turned his head. His eyes found my face and stayed there. I walked toward him. I was crying already. Not quietly, not carefully, the way I had been crying for 3 months, but openly, with my whole body, because he was there. He was real. He was breathing and sitting and looking at me, and he was there. And then his expression stopped me. He was looking at my face the way you look at something you are trying and failing to recognize. Not with joy. Not with the particular undoing of a man who has been separated from his wife for 3 months and is seeing her for the first time. With careful, gentle confusion. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice was quiet and uncertain. "Do I know you?" I stood very still. "Daniel," I said. "It's me, it's Clara." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, very gently, "Why are you crying? Did something happen?" Later, the doctor sat with Lily and me in a small room and explained it plainly. The explosion had caused significant trauma. The blood loss and shock had affected his memory in ways that were not uncommon in cases of this severity. He remembered some things. He had retained language and basic function, and much of his personality. But large portions of his past, including the people in it, were simply gone. The doctor said, memory of this kind sometimes returned gradually when the patient was reintroduced to familiar environments, familiar people, familiar sensory experiences. He said there were no guarantees. He said it required patience. I told him I had 3 months of practice at waiting for Daniel. I told him I was not going anywhere. So I stayed. Every day I sat with him. I told him stories about our life, the way you tell stories to someone who has never heard them before. Slowly, with detail, watching their face for anything. Our first conversation at a mutual friend's dinner party, where he talked for 40 minutes about a documentary he had seen. And I missed everything he said because I was too busy watching the way his hands moved when he was excited about something. The afternoon he proposed in the middle of a hardware store, because we had been arguing about paint colors. And he said suddenly that he wanted to argue about paint colors with me for the rest of his life. Our wedding in October, with the leaves on the ground outside the venue, and his grandmother crying before the ceremony even started. I showed him photographs. I took him to places. I watched his face carefully every time for any flicker of something familiar returning. For weeks, nothing. He was always kind to me. Always patient and gentle. He listened to every story with real attention. But his eyes when he looked at me were the eyes of someone looking at a person they do not yet know. And every evening when I went back to the room the clinic had arranged for me, I lay in the dark and held the grief of it quietly, because I had promised myself I would not let him see how much it cost me. He had enough to carry. Then one evening about 5 weeks in, I drove him to a small park on the edge of town. Not because I had a plan, just because something told me to go there. It was the kind of place that reminded me of the park near our house, where we used to walk on Sunday mornings when he was home. Nothing remarkable about it. Just trees and a bench, and the particular quality of late afternoon light that I have always found difficult to look at without feeling something. We'd sat on the bench together. The sky was going orange and pink above the mountains. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then, without deciding to, I began to sing. A song Daniel had loved for years. One we used to play on long drives with the windows down. One he had sung to me once on our anniversary in the kitchen while something burned on the stove, and neither of us cared. I sang it quietly. My voice was unsteady. I could not help it. For a long moment Daniel sat beside me without moving, just listening. Then I felt him go very still in a different way than before. The particular stillness of something arriving. I kept singing. I did not look at him. Then I heard him exhale, long and slow. Like something releasing. I stopped. When I turned he was looking at me with an expression I had not seen on his face in 5 weeks. Not confusion. Not careful polite attention. Something older than that. Something that lived further down. His eyes were full of tears. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Clara," he said. "Just my name. 2 syllables." Spoken in the voice I had been playing on a recording in an empty house for 3 months. I could not speak. He stood up from the bench and pulled me toward him and held me the way he used to hold me before every deployment. Tightly. Completely. Like the intention was to leave something behind that would last while he was gone. We were both crying. Not carefully anymore. Not quietly. The way you cry when something that has been broken for a very long time finally comes back together. He held my face in both his, the way he always did. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "I don't know how long I was gone, but I remember now. I remember everything." I told him it didn't matter how long. I told him he was here. I told him that was the only thing. We stayed on that bench until the light was completely gone from the sky. Neither of us wanted to move. Neither of us needed to say anything more. Some things are too large for words and too real to need them. He had promised me every time before every deployment, "I will come back to you." It had taken him 3 months and cost us both more than I know how to measure. But he had kept it. In the end, through everything, he had kept it. If this story stayed with you, leave a heart in the comments below. And tell me, have you ever held on to hope for someone when everyone around you said it was time to let go? I read every single one, so you never miss the next story.